You ever have those times when you thought you had a good plan and then God does something and makes you realize that you didn't have that great of a plan? His plan's way better. So this was supposed to be a 4-week series, and it was supposed to end last week. And then it kind of all shuffled around, and we ended up adding a week on the back end. And there was a little bit of me that was like, oh no, what am I gonna add, right? When it comes to that, like, you don't wanna mess it up. You don't wanna I don't know. There's anxiety because you don't want to mess up the series. You don't want to do something God doesn't want you to do. You don't want to try to like shoehorn something in. And so I was like, I don't know. And then we end up here, and I realized preparing, really not even this week, I realized preparing the last few weeks that this week this sermon is just kind of a God thing because it puts a cap on the last 4 that I had not planned to do. And ultimately, this is kind of the route we're going to take in attacking it. Like, if you unpack the last 4 weeks of what we've talked about, the conversations have been around, like, he's more than enough for my stability. He's more than enough for my security. He's more than enough for my sustenance. He's more than enough for, I forgot last week's word. Oh my goodness, that's the first one. I just said that one out loud, stability. Anyway, he's more than enough for me in these times of trouble, right? And he's more than enough for me when I need him, right? And like, that's all well and good, but if you're a Christian and you accept that God is more than enough, right? That God is everything we could need, and that his plans are going to take care of me abundantly beyond what I could ever ask or imagine, right? If you believe that, then that leaves you with one overarching problem. Life is still hard, and it's somebody's fault. And that really leads us to the crux of the issue when we go through hard times, when we're dealing with hard things, no matter what they are, whether it's the sin that plagues you in your life, whether it's just the fact that sometimes life is hard, whether it's crazy stuff that's just out of your hands. The question then becomes, am I good enough? Can I ever be good enough, right? If God's not the problem, then it's gotta be me. And I'm gonna spoil you're never gonna be. That's the Bible. That's why we need Jesus. You're never gonna be, right? And so God, in his grace and in his mercy, has provided us with a way to become better. He's remaking us in his image, right? And so it's a process, and it's hard, and it can be tough, but he's given us a path forward where we don't have to be good enough, and we can rely on him. And as we learn to rely on him more and more and more, it's not that we become good enough, it's that him in me makes this whole situation enough, right? We call that process sanctification. And so let's just walk through it. We're gonna be in Hebrews chapter 12. So let me give you a little background on what we're looking at here. This book, Hebrews, was written to Hebrews. It was written to Jewish Christians. There's some question as to who the author is. Nobody really knows. It feels a lot like, when you read it, it feels a lot like a sermon, but it is a letter. So probably it was dictated and written down, which, like, that's always hard. That's always hard to read when something's dictated and written down. You start reading, and like, if you had to read a transcript of me right now, you would be so furious because I probably stopped 4 sentences dead in the middle without putting a period on them, you know? And it kind of can get that way. It was most likely written, some scholars believe it was written to Jewish Christians living in Italy. This would have been a particularly tough time to be a Christian or a Jew living in Italy, because it would have also been during the time of Nero as emperor of Rome. Nero took Christians and hung them on poles and made them torches for his garden. That was the time and the situation potentially that the writer's speaking into. And the book is an encouragement to see Jesus as God and to see Jesus as the answer, and faith in Jesus as the thing that is the greatest. That Jesus is the greatest and faith in him is the thing that saves me. Jesus is greater than the angels. Jesus is greater than the priests. Jesus is greater than the Torah. Jesus is greater. And then you get to the last 3 chapters, and that's where we're going to be camping, is in chapter 12 today. And that turns into this exhortation to just maintain the faith. And you can imagine if you're one of these people, and this actually is the scenario that you're in, right? You're hiding in Rome because you don't want to be killed, that you would need some encouragement. And chapter 11 lists off this about something like 18 heroes from the Old Testament. And then 12 starts this way. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So we're going to start there. We'll pick up in verse 4 in just a minute. So let's unpack this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. So the language here is actually important because it's trying to convey something. Language is always important because it's trying to convey something. It's trying to convey something specific. It's trying to describe something, right? So since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, we just list off biblical heroes and a great cloud of witnesses. The word cloud, the Greek word for cloud, kind of indicates a crowd, right? And so it's, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. So you have these 18 testimonies that witness to us about Jesus and his power and his goodness, right? But also there are more. There are maybe some unwritten, unspoken that we don't know of, and it's this great cloud of witnesses. Now, the word cloud, I think, is important here because the cloud's kind of an amorphous blob, right? You would be tempted to think of it this way. Since we are surrounded by such a great crowd of witnesses, so since there's all of these people in heaven looking down on us, cheering us on, let us not grow weary. That's not really what he's driving at. The word, the Greek word for witness is the same word that the word martyr is derived from. And a martyr, the death of a martyr, bears witness to the power of faith in Jesus. And so really what he's saying is, since we have been preceded by these amazing testimonies, since we know the stories that lead us to Jesus, and we see the faithfulness of God in that, and that he, from the beginning of time, orchestrated this so that when we got here now, Jesus would have died and for our sins and saved us and redeemed redeemed the sins of all of us, and all we have to do is accept him. Since we have these testimonies that testify to him and his power, let us not lose faith. It's not that there are people in heaven looking down on you, cheering you on. It's that those in the faith who have gone before you, their testimony should bring you encouragement to stay strong because they stood strong during their trials, so you can in yours. Right? And so the point here is he saved you, right? He saved you, so don't lose heart. The writer specifically writes it this way: consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Consider Jesus, who in his plan and in his his plan to redeem you, endured horrible opposition, even to death, because these people are likely facing death, from sinners. Because Jesus did it, you don't have to grow weary, you can do it. Right? And this is in the process that's laid out for sanctification. This is theological mumbo jumbo that I'll get to at the end, but this is the conversation about salvation. Right? He saved you. He saved you, so don't grow weary. He saw you as important enough to save. He saw you as worthy of being saved, so don't grow weary. And on top of that, he's been through what you've been through, what you're going through, so don't grow weary. Right? He goes on, verse 4. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding blood. And have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us. We respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good and in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. So the writer sums this whole thought up about discipline early on, very, very succinctly, very well. Endure hardship as discipline. Endure hardship as discipline, right? This is a theory. I was thinking about it this week. I feel like there was a time when we preached this. Endure hardship as discipline. But I feel like you know when you unpack, we're messed up, right? And so the act of receiving scripture, the act of receiving wisdom from the Bible can be messed up by our messed upness, right? And so when you hear endure hardship as discipline, there's a few things that tend to happen. One is that our nature takes us to the place where we just decide that every time it gets hard, God is punishing us, right? Anybody in the room like me and kind of a little melancholy, like in their temperament, right? It can be easy to go there, right? God is just punishing me. I got this wrong, and he's punishing me for being wrong. This is what I get for being a piece of crap, sinful person, right? This is what I get. And we end up with this persecution complex that comes from God. Here's the thing, not all that we think comes from God. Not all discipline is corporal punishment. Right? If you have kids, a small fraction of your discipline is corporal punishment. I don't know, maybe in my house, there's sometimes kids just need a spanking, right? Nobody's gonna run up here and all right, we're good. There's sometimes it just needs to happen, right? But that is the last thing that I wanna do. I'm 6 feet tall, 6 feet and a half inch in these boots, and I weigh 200, we're gonna call it 85 pounds. I don't wanna do that. My children are tiny. I'm afraid, right? I don't wanna do that, right? It's the last thing. Sometimes discipline is corporal punishment, it's punishment straight up. Sometimes it's not. This is one that happens in my house every time. And every time I do it, I'm trying to instill some discipline. But, it's got to happen 4 or 5 times a week. My wife is vegan. My kids are normal. If you gave them microwaved frozen chicken nuggets every day, they would be happy. Amanda makes them really healthy things that she tries to make taste like they'll want it. And most of the time, they take 2 bites, push it away, and say, Mommy, I'm not hungry anymore, right? This happens at dinner just about every day. And just about every day, I look at them or she looks at them and says, okay, that's fine. You're not eating anything else. If you get hungry later, you can come back and eat this. It'll be cold, but you can eat this, right? You don't have to go to bed hungry. You're just not gonna waste food that I paid for, right? And Nora actually is starting to catch on to that because she said something about it. And I looked at her and I said, baby, who do you think paid for that food? Well, you did, Daddy. I was like, okay. So do you think it's very nice for you to just throw away things that I bought for you? Well, no. Okay, right? I'm instilling discipline, but it's not really punishment, right? And then there's other times, right, when we're talking about discipline, enduring hardship is discipline, there's other times where you just straight up, your kids are about to do something dumb, and you just let them do it, knowing all the while that you're gonna counsel them through it on the back end, right? In my house right now, for whatever reason, Nora, she's way smarter than this, but sometimes smart kids do dumb things. She's decided that pillows are great to stack to make stools. Nah. I'm not an engineer and I know that ain't how it works, right? Mind you, I have probably 4 stools in my house of various sizes because I got short little kids. So she's decided she's gonna stack pillows. And so Nora stacks the pillows. Now she's got pretty good balance, so she'll stand on them and do this deal, but she'll be all right. The other day, Lottie walked up to it. Lottie's 2. And if you've ever seen her run, she's not gonna be a sprinter. So she got my legs, it's just not happening. So the pillows are stacked and she's trying to step on it. And I just looked at her, I said, baby, if you step on that, you are going to fall. I didn't get up and stop her. I mean, if you're trying to stand on pillows, there's a decent chance you're gonna land on some pillows. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you fall, There's sometimes you just allow life to happen. You allow your children to endure hardship as discipline, right? So we can tend to see all enduring hardship as punishment, not discipline, as exclusively punishment. There are times that God punishes us, right? I feel like you can't read the Bible and think that's. There are times that God punishes us, but it's not always. And so hardship is not exclusively punishment, but we need to endure it as discipline. There's the other side where we have this tendency. Some of us have this natural tendency, right, to see hardship as betrayal. We don't endure it as discipline. We unpack it as betrayal. Life is hard, therefore God must not care. God must not be with me, right? This is natural. This is a natural reaction that we come by, right? Now that doesn't make it right because our emotions are dumb. You remember who you dated in high school? Your emotions are dumb, right? And so my 2-year-old, if she gets in trouble, she perceives discipline as betrayal, straight up. If she gets in trouble, it's immediately this. If I raise my voice, it's immediately this. No, Daddy, don't spank me. I never spank her. It's no. And then she'll just shut down and she, right? Just screaming, right? And it's dude, calm down. I just got mad because you weren't putting on your shoes, right? And then if I get her really upset, she won't even look at me, which breaks my heart. Right? Because discipline in her little brain gets processed as betrayal because it's this. You're upset with me. I know I did this, but you're upset with me. And if you're upset with me, you must hate me. You've betrayed me. Right? And we can do that to God. The fact of the matter is, we just have to see the hard things in life as God teaching us or allowing us to be taught. We think we can convince ourselves that because it's hard, he's not there. And that's proof of him either being bad or non-existent. But if you look back, if you think about it and you look back on all the hard times you've endured, you can see his fingerprints all over them and how he's grown you and how he's used them for your good. So actually, enduring hardship is not evidence of his non-existence. Enduring hardship with him present with you by your side is evidence of your sonship, of your being his child. That is exactly what the writer says, right? For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we all have human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? Amen. He's saving you, so stop resisting him. That's what's happening. Life is hard, and he's using it for your good. So stop resisting it. Just let him walk with you in it. Unpack for just a minute the audience. This writer just said, endure hardship as discipline. He's speaking to Jews who do not live in Judea. So the Jewish people starts with Abraham. It's like 3,500 years ago. Abraham is called by God to go to the promised land. He moves to the promised land. He has a son named Isaac. Abraham is told by God that this son will be the father, that he would be the father of many nations through this son. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. Jacob occupies the promised land for a while. And then what happens? They run out of food. They run out of food, so they go to Egypt. So they move into the land, then they lose the land. They had the land for like 2 generations. They lose the land, they move to Egypt. Now in Egypt, they become slaves because the king of Egypt is afraid of them and makes them slaves. They become slaves, they live in slavery. They then leave Egypt and arrive back at the promised land after 40 years of wandering in the desert. And if you just unpack this, like just look at a map, they did not wander in a very big patch of land. Like relative to the rest of the world, they wandered in a pretty small area. Like they just basically walked in circles for 40 years, right? And then it's not like, also, there's nothing that says they were lost. It just says that they were left to wander. That's good. Like you can be in Walmart and wander your butt off and never be lost. Right? And so they move from there into the promised land. Finally, after 40 years, a whole generation passes. They get to the promised land and they then start years of war to reclaim the land that they had to leave because of famine, right? So that happens. Then they occupy the land for a few generations, but then this King David comes along, he expands the territory, that's awesome. King Solomon, his son, takes over. He kind of holds everything together, builds a temple. It's awesome. This is great. Solomon's kids, morons. They split the kingdom in 2, right? You have the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. Northern kingdom is called Israel. Southern kingdom is called Judea, right? Or Judah. So Israel rejects God far more quickly and harshly. So God allows them to go into exile first. They're essentially lost to history after this. The southern kingdom, Judah, they end up in exile, and eventually they make their way back. They rebuild Jerusalem, they rebuild the temple, but this is hundreds of years that have passed. So they lost the kingdom again, they lost the land again. Then they come back, they rebuild the temple, they rebuild Jerusalem, but then they're run over by empire after empire. The Ptolemies from Egypt, then Alexander the Great, then the Romans, right? And that's where we're at here in this book is the Roman rule. A couple years after this book is written, they rebel against the Romans. The Romans are like, we're not gonna have any of it. So the Romans get rid of the temple, they tear down the temple, and they rename the land. They call it Palestine. It's the first time it ever shows up. Then, eventually, about 700 years later, the Arabs come in and start colonizing the area, and the Jews end up leaving because it's so hostile. They lost the land again, and they didn't get it back until the 50s, 40s, 1949. That's the people that the writer's talking to. Endure hardship as discipline. A nation with a very clear identity and no home. A nation with a very clear identity that has been brutalized, run over, taken advantage of, raped and pillaged by every empire that rose up in the known world. Endure hardship as discipline. These people are enduring persecution by one of the most cruel human beings to walk the planet ever. Endure hardship as discipline. I don't mean to be mean, but how soft have we become? We got it pretty good. When I'm telling you to endure hardship as discipline, what you're probably unpacking is, okay, when money's real tight, I should just see God teaching me here. Because we live in a place of unreal abundance. For most of human history, you would have had to grow your food, mill your flour, make your bread, like over a fire, right? And now, if you want to have food, you just got to pay $10 extra and somebody will bring it to your butt. You don't even got to get off the couch, right? We live in a time of crazy abundance, and we live in a nation that protects our religious freedom, so we're not under persecution for what we believe. There may be people that don't like us for what we believe, but that's way different than being put than being tied to a pole and lit on fire. The writer said that these people endure hardship as discipline. The things that you are going through, I don't mean to minimize them because you've never, like the hardest thing you've ever been through is the hardest thing you've ever been through, right? And you don't have the tools to endure what they endured because you haven't had to endure it yet. But perspective is important. And the things that we live through, we need to see them not as a rejection from God, not as punishment from God, not as betrayal from God. We need to see them as Him instilling discipline in us to create us, to redeem us, to remake us in His image. We need to stop resisting it. We need to stop resenting it. I didn't do this last service, and I did not prepare to do this service, so just bear with me here. Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Right? No, you'll never be good enough for the tests of life, for the hardships of life. But you serve a God who is, and who is working all things together for you, for your good, so that through Him, you can be good enough to stand the test of life. You can be good enough to withstand the trials of life. You can be strong enough through Him, right? The writer of Hebrews ends the chapter 12 like this. Verse 28, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. for our God is a consuming fire. He will save you, so be thankful. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, that's heaven, the hope of heaven, the kingdom that cannot be shaken, that won't go away, right? So what we have is this. This is this process. It's called progressive sanctification. So I have been saved. This is salvation. I've been saved, right? If you believe in Jesus, if you've asked Jesus Christ to be the Lord of your life, right, then you have been saved from your sin and you have received salvation, right? And then we move to he is saving me. This is sanctification. This is the act of God recreating you in his image. This is the act of him on a daily basis saving you again and again and again from the things that will cause you to stumble, from the things that will cause you to go back to the old life, from the things that will cause you to begin to remake yourself in your own image, right? This is the process of sanctification. And then you have, I will be saved. This is glorification. This is the hope of heaven. This is the hope that says it might suck right now, but it won't then. God, in his goodness, walks with us in our mess. He's more than enough because he is, and he's willing to be present. He's more than enough because he is, and he is here. He is with us, and his presence in us changes everything. The biggest problem for us is just our reaction to him, right? If we can learn not to resent him, if we can learn not to resist him, if we can learn to let him do his job, which is to work all things together for the good of those who love him. If we can learn to do that, we'll see him as more than enough. And we'll walk through this life knowing that we're never not enough. Not because of us, but because of him. Without him, we're pretty much always not enough. So, I don't know. The biggest thing as I was kind of seeing this and unpacking it, the sermon series I thought would be good to have a conversation about the emotional end of this, especially during this time of year, because I know I'm not the only one who's just a little bit more depressed because it's dark all the time. Like I'm counting down the days to December 22nd. That's my favorite day of the year. That's when it starts getting light more. It's when the days start getting longer. Right? Counting down the days to December 22nd. So I thought it would be good to talk about the emotional end of this a little bit and kind of have that conversation. And God in his, providence allowed for us to end here. And this conversation is less about the emotional end of it, and it's more about the faith, right? He did save you, and he is saving you, and he is walking with you in this. Your job is not to be awesome. Your job is not to your job is not to constantly be tinkering with yourself. Your job is not to constantly be trying to read all of the Tony Robbins books you can possibly read so that you can achieve full realization of self or whatever that is, self-actualization, whatever the crap that the words they make up. Like that's not your job is to walk through this life, and when you're met with hardship, have the faith to ask, God, what are you doing here? And what can I learn right now? And if you'll be faithful in asking those questions, he'll be faithful in growing you through them. That's it. Let's pray. God, thank you Man, thank you for what you've done for us. Thank you that that we don't have to do this alone. Thank you that you are patient enough with us to walk with us through everything and that we face, and that you're good enough to use the things in this life and work them together for our good. Like that you care about us that much. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for fixing us. Thank you for the fact that one day we will get to be with you in heaven. We thank you for all of it. Lord, I just pray that you would give all of us the courage the next time we face something hard, the next time we feel empty, the next time we feel like maybe you're not there or you don't care. I pray that you give us the faith to ask you to show us what we need to learn and to show us where we need to grow, and then give us the strength to believe you in it and to move forward. We love you and we thank you. Amen.